So anybody who wants to criticize, me putting up Billy Bob Neck, saying what's next, Gay History Month, and why we don't have a White History Month, it's obviously common sense why there's no White History Month, right? I mean, we know that, like, the difficulty of the life that I experience is because of one demographic of people. I whether it justifies all the actions that came after or not, I can't speak on that, because that's not, like, that's not me. Obviously, I don't endorse violence of any kind, and I know civil discourse is a rare thing nowadays, so if you, like, actually get a hang of a person who really is upset, maybe that's a luxury. But the point I'm making is, like, the reason I put up the video with the, what's next, Gay History Month and the White History Month thing, and a couple of N-word slurs and blaming maybe a certain group of people, is because at that point it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say. Nothing you would say or do would appease a certain group of people as to the damage that they did to a country, right? Now, for some crafty individuals, the videos I put up, the videos I make of myself, all that, especially with the time period that they're in, like 5-6 years, yeah, they're obviously going to be like, if you're a crafty individual and you wanted to make someone look shitty like me, you obviously can do that, right? Because the videos are up there, and you know that, the time period is a terrible time period where, like, we're basically at the end of the world, right? So, like, not at the end of the world as we know it. We're talking about, like, continued climate change and racial violence and mental health issues and an entire system that basically just failed on, like, upon itself, right? It hit itself. And I didn't make a statement before because I already mentioned that the English language itself is just evil. So anytime you use it in any kind of form, anytime you speak, you're literally just shooting yourself in the foot. But the statement has to be made. The statement needs to be said that at that point, whether you use the N-word or not, you're always going to appear a certain way to certain individuals that already hated white people from the get-go, right? They already hated white people. There was already hatred towards white people. They were getting blamed for everything that's wrong in the person's life. They already they already were getting blamed for everything that was wrong in the person's life. They already had a preconceived notion of the white person, right? There's some people out there, I know it's not all different people, different races that view white people or black people or all this in a certain way. Everybody knows there's always a few bad apples. But obviously, once we're in the years like 2021 and all this, where tensions are high, people aren't really joking anymore, right? So the mood is much more serious. So when somebody sees a video, the kind I'm describing, I know how it comes off as, because people look for red flags, right? They're gonna look for red flags, right? Because I could play the card of, oh yeah, I was just joking, right? I didn't mean what I said, and that's all fine. But because of the year and the amount of people that have died, and because of in this specific case, racial violence and racial violence and just in general, like, systemic issues that are, that everybody got fucked over in Canada. In Canada specifically, everybody got fucked over. It's very, very difficult to live here, regardless of what race you are, because of the bureaucracy and the paperwork and the way the laws are structured and all that. I'm not telling anybody what to do. Again, this is not a channel that I tell people what to do, and I didn't tell anybody what to do. I'm just saying that from what I posted, right, and the way I come off as, and the things I think about, right, because I know I'm self-aware of the things I say and do. I know I come off a certain way, but the thing is, making a joke about a White History Month only makes sense because regardless of what you say online at this point, even if I use the N-word, which I haven't, I admit it, right? I admit to all my mistakes. I admit that everything I did wrong. I'm not lying like these other people, because we already know the world already rewards bad behavior, right? So I made that conclusion some 4 years ago. I made that conclusion, and the thing is I already said that, like what people like really sick sadistic people are preying on is literally just a biological human being, because these sick sadistic individuals, some of them aren't even humans, some of them are like entities. Like some of these sick sadistic humans aren't even humans. I need to like repeat that, but that's the truth. And I'm just saying on my, at least for what I'm responsible, right? The thing is, like, for some people, right, it doesn't matter how many apologies a white person gives that, about colonialism and, oh, Trudeau is crying and, well, no, because I get it. Trudeau's apologies aren't sincere, right? Like those kinds of apologies aren't sincere. What a sincere apology sounds like, I don't know. You'd have to find out yourself on the inside, if you're an Indigenous person about, like residential schools or something. And by the way, there's always like a system, and there's always like, that's a story for another day. But in oh shit. For all intents and purposes of this video, it's about for all intents and purposes on the video, I've said it once and I said it again, that you already come off a certain way to these individuals. Some individuals, they hate white people for no reason, right? Like I'm being dead serious. They hate them for no reason or intuitively, right? Some people, they hate the person on an intuitive level, right? So I'm saying this in reference to, sorry, I gotta catch my breath. I'm saying this in reference to, like, some individuals, right? Like after their lives have been ruined by the system, and obviously, like the white people are to blame for the system being the way it is. There's no question there. But some of them will immediately go to blame them, like for maybe something else, like crime they commit after something. I don't know, right? And I'm not even saying one side or the other. But what I am saying is, the blame makes sense, right? There was never like a question whether you blame them or not. The question is or the thing I'm arguing is that, the blame is already going to happen, right? So, like, regardless of what you say online, in person, right, the correct way to do things is that you're not saying anything. And the thing is, like, the individuals that aren't saying anything, and maybe this is the flaw of my argument, but, individuals that aren't saying anything are doing the right thing, right? Because that's situational and all that, because you don't want to be someone else's quantity, right? You don't want to be somebody else's object. You don't want them to, tell you what to do and be a part of their script of life. Being like, oh yeah, that person is this, like this and that, and they categorize them and they sort them in their own mind. They don't even need to say anything, but their mind automatically, automatically stereotypes the person because of whatever, right? Because of some emotional. Sometimes it's just some kind of emotional intuition. Because again, human emotions, they don't mean anything. They don't have any merit. And honestly, frankly, human emotions are the cause of violence in like 99% of cases, whether it's because of anger, stigmatization of just some individual. Like if you've seen Diary of a Wimpy Kid with the cheese touch thing, right? Like unfortunately, not all individuals think this way, right? Not all individuals. It's never all individuals, but some individuals, with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, right, with the cheese touch, they need some person to put down in order for them to get up. I'm just being honest, I'm just saying, right? And if you're actually existing in the world, and in my opinion, I think the world, everything has already been decided. So, like, you're rarely gonna change the direction of the world, especially in 2026, in regards to like human behavior and why or how that person behaved, because a lot of it is just it's the parents. The parents can ruin a person. Literally, a person's parents can ruin them for life, right? So, like, and I already said upon myself, right? The actions of my parents, especially me at 25 living on my own, they don't reflect my actions at all. So I don't take any blame for them. Anything that they've said, the reason they didn't help the homeless, that's not on me, right? That's their fault. Excuse me, I'm getting more fresh air because I need to move here. but that's not my fault, that's their fault. And so obviously, there's a certain group of people that they're blaming. Here, I'm going to try to cut through here. There's obviously a certain group of people that everybody's blaming, and so the thing is like, white people already come off a certain way to some of these other people. I'm not going to say who or how and all that, but they already come off a certain way because when you're going to school and you're not saying anything, even though like some issues are happening, that makes you complicit, right? That makes you complicit in the system, right? So you can say nothing and go to school and get your computer degree like I was trying to do, and you can see all these events happening in the world, and you could say nothing, right? You can say nothing. It's an option, right? Freedom gives you choices, right? When you have freedom, you have the ability to make choices. You can choose whatever career you want. You can live wherever you want. You still can, right? Even if with a high housing crisis, like with high costs for housing, you could still take a trailer park or a tent like myself and pack up wherever you live and move somewhere else, right? And it's not a nice way to live, right? Because it's like I can just fuck up one place and just go somewhere else, right? But in all seriousness, right? Like because the time of conversation, I understand as a child, the time of conversation, it might be over in 2026. The time to conversate, because you get labeled annoying and all this stuff. And so there's people out there who take advantage of the fact that the naiveness of the average person, the naiveness of, well, not even naiveness, just they take advantage of people because people are so desperate, they're so vulnerable, and they're so alone, right? The only person who my mom talks to is basically me, because she decided to choose me over, helping those homeless, helping herself, helping individuals, right? She thought that, I'm as an individual, I'm exceptionally perfect, so I'll bring this person to life, I'll bring another person to drain the system on the world, and that's me, right? I'm not some special case. I'm not some like guy. I'm not some special case. But what I am saying, right? You could run away from the problem, but the problem still stays the same. So for me, it's very obvious that everything points to this idea, like, yeah, the system will provide its bare minimum. It won't provide anything great, but it'll provide the bare minimum, and it'll do that because nobody wants to take responsibility, right? For when I mess up, right, and there is some kind of cosmic accountability that the person's gonna have to take into account. So me messing up, like it would reflect someone else, and it would they're the one who are going to take responsibility, whether it's jail time or whether it's some kind of community service. They're going to take responsibility, and this is implicitly. So this isn't something you directly see. This is implicitly. It's a passive thing where it occurs whether you want it or not, right? The person implicitly is put in a position where the accountability will occur in whether it's in some kind of karmic way, whether it's a literal jail sentence, whether it's like something in the afterlife. We all know that. Well, no, actually, I know, because I'm talking about something that's not physically in front of me or behind me. And it's very difficult to escape this, because the moment you're born, you're immediately put into these implicit biases that aren't in your control anymore. And that's why the physical world is a trap. It's a trap. It's dangerous. It's I mean, there is a bare minimum of common sense that any person requires to function on any level, right? On any level in the real world, there's a bare minimum that the person requires to function. Excuse me. Here, I'm gonna cut through here. So, like, there's a bare minimum of common sense that the person requires to function. And, it's because of these, like, passive biases and these implicit things that, very shitty people can take advantage of. And I know this firsthand. because I can consciously, intuitively, I know that this is what these people do, right? And they'll be like, oh, well, you said that, you're the one who said that, so, why don't you just think about positive thoughts? Why not just think about, unicorns, puppies, and rainbows, and donuts? And it's because the issues of the world, right? And very, very sick, sadistic individuals, they'll just go forward on the progress front. They'll be like, you know what, we just gotta progress, we need to progress, right? Being progressive and whatever, right? Being progressive doesn't mean shit, right? Because the problem, this, like, war never changes. I've said it before, just like in Fallout, right? The quotation is as relevant as back then as it is today. Excuse me, I get a breather. So like I said, I can make a video, saying whatever online, right? But nobody would know that I said that. And those things that I say, like, maybe on a personal level, I can tell you that, those things that I said don't reflect me, or, the video was a joke. But again, like I said, like, the truth and reconciliation, like, whether the indigenous people think that, like, the apology was enough or not, I don't know, right? And it's maybe not my business to know how they actually feel, and some people might think differently. They might feel a certain way differently. There's obviously, if someone broke into your house and told you how to live your life, you probably would have a bitter feeling, a bitter taste for that person afterwards. But the relevance to the video here is that I posted that one video, right? And obviously, like, some employers that are highly liberal, and they can fire you, and they can be like, this one video where, even, it's not even just the Gay History Month, it's just one video that you created where you have Long Neck talking about being a criminal and going to JDC. Obviously, like, that's obviously a devastation, right? And it's I try to put it to words, right? Because it sucks for me, right? I'm never gonna have a normal life, and I internalized that once I put up those videos with Gay History Month and White History Month and why we don't have one. And I don't know why I'm saying we, like we're like a collective, because I'm not talking to anyone, right? Right now I'm just talking to my phone. But, like, we don't have, we're never gonna have, a collective month or a collective week for this type of thing. I mean, but the thing is obviously I knew, like, by the time it's 2021 and I make a video like that, right? Obviously there's, like, some helplessness in the person. Maybe I'm just trying to make money. But I already said, like, I already know how I come off when I make a video like that. What's next? Gay History Month and, White History Month, and why we don't have a White History Month. I already know how I come off, right? I know how I come off. But then again, you need to ask yourself, right? If these are questions that, people are going to be asking themselves, right? Like, some people naively, maybe it's a child, right? They actually don't know why there's no White History Month. And then, you go through the events just in the last 25 years that I've been alive, and, you quickly understand why there's no White History Month. Granted, it explains why there is no, White History Month, but, like, a lot of people already come off that way, right? They already come off that way, right? The emotional, like, now, obviously, I'm not saying that I know what's going on in people's minds, right? We don't know, right? You could categorize a person with a Trump flag, and you can say that, oh, they are voting for Trump, but then all of a sudden, in a last minute of change, they're like, no, I'm voting for Biden, right? Like, we just don't know these things, right? You can categorize every white person who didn't make a statement on Twitter, or not have a BLM flag, or they didn't do the whole black square thing for, George Floyd. You can categorize people at anything at any time, right? Because everybody's gonna tell you what is right and what is wrong. But the thing is I mean, categorically, we can all agree that after 2012, the world ended, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I mean, in my opinion, right, in my books, all of it's wrong. All of it is obscene. All of it is wrong. Even me making this video, the only reason I make this video in the English language and I even speak is because I have to make an explanation, I have to make an explanation for the folks that, might have watched the videos and they have a preconceived notion of me that, I didn't create an apology. They see the one video and, they immediately have an opinion. Because I get it, nobody really trusts each other, right? These are very, very scary times where, you don't trust people. You can't trust anyone. You can't trust anything. And the video implicitly tells you that, the stereotypes exist for a reason, right? Like, a video like that had to be made, and so, people are gonna ask why, but the truth of the matter, right? It's harder to do this as psychologically. It really on a belief style, right? In my opinion, it's harder to do this as a white person, right? You already come off this way. You already come off as a white person this way to minorities, the Gay History Month. You already come off this way to minorities because of the past, right? I don't need to make a video, like any kind of video, right? And I already said that the person already probably has a preconceived notion of you because you are white, right? And sure, we can say, okay, bro has male aggression crisis, whatever. You can use whatever you want in the books to underlyingly explain the person's behavior. I mean, for me, I don't know, after going on this walk and really think about it, honestly, there's not much I can defend, but I do apologize, I guess, for those people who had to hear that. I did say some pretty bad things. I really meant to say just, I really meant to say that, it was a stupid video. I already knew I was never going to get hired by any serious company and all that because of, the one reason. But also because there's so many other candidates that just have way more merit. They have way more skills, way more achievements. Maybe even their diploma, outweighs mine. And that's just me being straight up and honest. Right? That's just me being straight up and honest, right? The difference is that, I already know, I wouldn't get hired, right? And I mean, maybe that's just me being negative, and I'm he's oh, he's just being negative and whatever. But it's oh yeah, well, he's just being negative, right? That's the whole thing. And by the way, don't let that distract you from the fact that there's individuals who didn't say anything at all. But, they still come off this way, right? This is how we, as white people, come off when we went forward, because the residential school thing has been going on since, the whole thing with the minorities, we already knew that they lived, lower quality of life, right? And as a white person, going through the years, right, you come off this way that, Gay History Month and, no White History Month. Why don't we have a White History Month? I mean, you already come off this way, right? So, I mean, TikTok is a Chinese app used to destabilize the West. I mean, that should be common knowledge for anybody. But you can argue what I said about any app, any person, and I already said, I'm not seeking friendship and attention and to be popular and liked. Because I already explained that the people that are liked by everybody, they aren't honest to themselves. They're maybe they're good people, but they're not honest. There's people, nobody has their back. Nobody has their back because they don't stand for anything, right? Because they're popular. They're willing to listen and kiss up to anybody because, that's just who they are. They want to be liked by everybody, right? Because they'll tell you what you want to hear. They'll make you feel good, but they're not honest, and actually they'll fake you out, and they'll trade you away, and they'll betray you the moment it benefits them in some kind of way. And I'm just being straight up. Now, as far as the comment goes, like I said, like, every white person already comes off that way, right? That, oh yeah, why don't we have our own month? And and I mean, even then, it's just how we go forward as a society and not look at history in general. Like, I mean, that's a whole thing on its own, right? Because how we got, like, okay, you have a Gay History Month, LGBTQ month, right? It occurs every month for me the same time. A person can claim anything, and ultimately, like, I deleted the video, so nobody, you can't trace it back to me. I'm not even the one who made the statement. It was Billy Bobneck. It wasn't me. Not to mention, talking about race is very relevant because some people, they don't look at race at all. They think that, it doesn't matter, and, the advantages don't exist, and that we're all just holding hands, and that, history doesn't matter, heritage doesn't matter. And I'm telling you that it unfortunately does matter, and since the time of, like, the Israelites in the Torah and the Old Testament, the Bible, right? We get the genealogy from Genesis. So you're wondering why, these people, they did everything right, and, they have this marriage, and why it falls apart. It's literally just the it's the genealogy, it's the descendantry, it's the ethnicity issue that it won't work. My mom was a chemical engineer. I'm not saying that, it's like cooking a stew, and, you need to know what ingredients come in, and you'll know what works and what doesn't, and you have to, like, research, and you'll try what, different marriages and different, like, or different just social social interactions and things like that, and how they'll turn out, right? You could put a Jew and a Muslim in a room, and maybe you'll get along. I don't know, right? And you have to do, like, full-on social experiments to really try these things out. But suffice to say, some people, they'll brush over history in general, and even white people, they just, I mean, most probably don't, right? They have some emotional awareness. Everybody has some emotional awareness, right? Like, so, I mean, obviously the question of the day then is, like, why post it, right? Why not just go with fate and just, just accept getting the random attack, right? Why go through the headache of trying to, advocate, for yourself for, the White History Month, and, kind of trying to start a dialogue where one would have maybe not occurred, right? I don't have any memory of, right? Like, again, like, the school system taking 12 to X amount of years, just to even, attain personhood, that's an entire conversation on its own. The amount of problems and arguing I had with my mom, and these issues, it's not even just arguing, but it's just, she wants what she wants, and I want what I want, and I have a different view of reality and myself than what she has, and she and it's just priorities, right? Like, me going to school, like, if she's raising a child, she should be focused on raising the child, not going to some vacations and fucking house parties and spas and and skiing and all this like other nonsense, it's all nonsense in the grand scheme of the question, because you know it's all nonsense because it's all nonsense because you know so it all ends up being nonsense because when you look at it from an analytical, critical perspective, when you look at it from like a critical perspective, you quickly understand that like no, when you look at it from a critical perspective, you quickly understand that like you need to stop these things, right? Because the clear, like I'm not going to say exactly why people don't interfere, like in other people's lives, and even help people who appear in need, like there's a person injured on a sidewalk, or there's a person who has a disease, and there's family doctors, and then you take race, class, and creed, and I could talk to you about how grim some causes of death are, how humiliating the person looks or feels, and it's entirely out of their control, and some of it has to do with history. I could talk to you about that, right? I could tell you about it. I could tell you how I could tell you about that, but the truth of the matter is, I mean, I can convolute a situation in my mind where a person's intentionally injured in a bad way, right? Like it's like, they intentionally, poison the person's food, or I don't know, they intentionally poison a person's food, or they they intentionally poison a person's food, or they I don't know, throw snow at them, or they throwing rocks at the homeless. I'm not saying that kind of stuff occurs, right? These videos aren't meant to provoke issues and cause more conflicts that already are, but the message of the videos, again, is it's a binary message that unfortunately, cruelty does exist, right? People can be cruel. They can they can be cruel, right? They could instigate a conflict. They could humiliate a person, right? Like what they're wearing, or they have like a little handkerchief or something, and suddenly the person's getting humiliated. It's some of these things are just what they are. They're just person getting humiliated, like throwing shit at people, or the wheelchair thing and whatnot. Okay, hold up, I'm gonna go